Oi, 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 oi. Oh my god, have you seen the market today? That was vicious. Oh my god, the Fed just basically pulled the rug out of under our feet. But I always like to take a look at the big picture, right? And for one of the people that I look up to concerning the macroeconomics, not that I completely agree with everything. However, someone with, obviously over 45 years of experience running basically the biggest hedge fund on the world is definitely someone you should listen to. And that person is Ray Dalio, right? So you've probably heard about the guy, co-chief investment officer and chairman of Bridgewater Associates. And this is his outlook about 2022. So I would like to, basically read this little passage that I've stumbled upon, and then, kind of a little bit explain what he means. So, in his words, 2022 will be the third year after massive global cyclical stimulation to end the recession, and the second year after the big presidential political change from the right to the left in the United States. As a result, I expect that most likely 2022 will be one of those transition years that come after the big stimulation and before the big tightenings and recessions. That means more like 2010-11 than 2008, or more like 2002 and 3 than 2000. So that's obviously, at least if his prognostic is correct, then that's definitely something I would say positive, right? And he's basically, a big fan of looking what happened in the past, because you can obviously learn a lot, because obviously all of these economic levers kind of work in tandem, right? So if you do X, Y will happen, and so this is basically his outlook, right? So he's basically saying, okay, there was this big pandemic, that was a huge crisis, right? It was a huge crash in 2020. Okay, it happened, and the Fed basically needed to react and stimulate the economy super fast. And that means they basically did a great job, right? If they wouldn't do it, we might have been in the recession, uh, after the whole COVID crash. It might have been much, much worse. Instead, we've seen this like V-shaped recovery, which is of course amazing. But how the Fed do that, right? They were pumping a lot of money into the economy to stimulate it. And of course, now the question is how to get out of this situation, right? Because there's like if you give candy to a little child and they just keep running in the circle, so, all hyped up. So now we need to, a little bit sober up. And that's a tricky thing to do, right? So he's basically saying, okay, the big crash 2020, it was terrible. We get out of it, but now we need to adjust to the kind of the normal, right? And that's the tricky part that Fed needs to address properly at the moment, right? And of course, as with everything, this little uncertainty, if the Fed can do it just right, that's what basically drove the stocks much lower today. Yeah, so let's read the rest. With the economy more than back to having capacity constraint and experiencing inflation, there will be a lessening of the extraordinary easing and some tightening, but probably not enough to kick things over. Typically, in this phase of the cycle, equities and other asset prices rise at the same time as interest rates rise. Also, typically in this phase of the cycle, economic and market volatility is lower than in those exciting years that mark the major tops and bottoms of the short term. 8 year plus minus 4 years economic and market cycles. So again, this here he goes a little bit about like these medium term market cycles. And again, if what Ray Dalio sees happening in in 2022 2023, it's basically concerning the equities, concerning the stocks we are most likely invested in, most of us, right? It's relatively positive. We will see some asset appreciation. It's not going to be obviously as wild as we've seen, during this V-shaped recovery, but it's going to happen. And in my mind, I would say I definitely agree with his outlook, right? Because there is one thing I always like to look at, and that's the real economy, right? Because obviously there are two economies. There's the finance economy, and then there's a real economy. The finance economy, that's all the equity, so stocks, and then obviously bonds and similar stuff, right? The quote unquote imaginary. But then you have the real economy, meaning the jobs and salaries, taxes, that kind of a movement. So what we're seeing now is basically the economy is very strong. The you know jobs are back. The economy is kind of going full speed. People want to spend. People want to have fun. People are excited to work, to do the normal stuff, right? We've been having this crazy pandemic for over 2 years. Obviously, it's still kind of on the table, but it's getting better, right? When we first hit all this COVID or the C word waves, it was a huge shock, and then a big of a redemption when kind of going into the summer. Then again, now we are in this like little bit shock period during the winter, where obviously it's much harder, especially in the kind of the colder climates. But again, now we are both heading into the summer months again, and considering kind of the development, we have the vaccines. They are available for people who want to get vaccinated, and at the same time, the C word is basically weakening and weakening, as happens with the virus, similar to flu or whatever. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents, and kind of mixed with the Ray Dalio's, obviously relatively experienced expertise. So kind of the overall what to take from it and how to properly position yourself for 2022, right? You know, be careful first and foremost, right? Which should be the case in any scenario, right? But we are in a market that's tricky, and you need to know what you're doing, right? Invest in a quality companies that are that have bright future in front of them, that have a clear roadmap to profitability, and don't overdo it, right? Be disciplined buyer. Again, that's a principle I'm always trying to preach. Be a disciplined buyer. Don't always have some money ready to invest. And yeah, I would say that's about it, right? So just stay in the market, stay invested, and if you want to take it to another level, then in the description there is a link how to join us inside Jeremy's private group, where we are always on top of everything, trying to stay in touch with the market, keeping our fingers on the pulse and researching all those companies, right? Looking for outsized opportunities, because that's where you can make the big uh, big reward. Okay, thanks. Take care.